inherit something from the people who came before us. Sometimes it's money, sometimes it's memories, sometimes it's regret. Daniel Reeves inherited a barn. Nothing more. At least that's what everyone told him. After losing his job and being forced out of his apartment at 35, the abandoned property seemed more like a burden than a blessing. The roof leaked. The wood was rotting. The entire place looked one strong storm away from collapse. Most people would have sold it and moved on. Daniel almost did. Then one afternoon, he noticed something strange hidden inside the oldest wall of the barn. What he found there would uncover a secret his grandfather had taken to the grave. And before long, complete strangers were offering Daniel millions to keep that secret buried. The letter arrived on a Tuesday morning. Daniel Reeves almost threw it away. Not because it looked suspicious, because he had stopped expecting good news a long time ago. At 35, most of the envelopes arriving in his mailbox carried bad news. Bills, final notices, payment reminders, rejection letters, things that demanded money he didn't have. The white envelope looked no different, so he tossed it onto the kitchen counter and forgot about it, at least for a few hours. The problem was that Daniel had become very good at pretending things weren't falling apart. Unfortunately, pretending and reality were two different things. Reality was standing right outside his apartment door. Reality was overdue rent. Reality was a company downsizing half its workforce. Reality was a bank account that looked smaller every week. And reality arrived that same afternoon when his phone rang. The number belonged to his manager. Daniel already knew what was coming before he answered. People always say they never see these things coming. Most of the time, that's a lie. Deep down, they know. Daniel knew. The company had been struggling for months. Projects were disappearing. Budgets were shrinking. People were being called into meetings and leaving with cardboard boxes. The signs were everywhere in. The only question was when his turn would come. Now he had his answer. The conversation lasted less than 6 minutes. 6 minutes. That was all it took to erase 8 years of work. His manager sounded uncomfortable, apologetic, professional, the usual corporate language. Nothing personal. Economic conditions, difficult decisions, position eliminated. Daniel listened quietly. There wasn't much else to do. Arguing wouldn't change anything. Begging wouldn't change anything. By the time the call ended, he was unemployed. Just like that, silence filled the apartment. Interesting, because losing a job doesn't always hurt immediately. Sometimes the shock arrives first. The pain comes later. Daniel sat on the couch, staring at the wall. Then he laughed, not because anything was funny, because the situation felt ridiculous. 3 months earlier, he had been planning for the future. Now he was calculating how many weeks he could survive without income. Life had changed that quickly. The following days passed in a blur. Applications, emails, interviews, more applications, more emails, more silence. Every morning, he woke up determined. Every evening, he felt slightly worse. The problem wasn't effort. Daniel worked hard, always had. The problem was timing. Hundreds of people were searching for the same jobs. Companies knew it. They could afford to be picky. Weeks turned into months. Savings disappeared. Then came the eviction notice. The final blow. Daniel stared at the paper for nearly 10 minutes. Not because he didn't understand it, because he did. Perfectly. 30 days. That was all he had left. 30 days before the apartment stopped being his. 30 days before he had nowhere to go. Interesting, because that's the moment most people start calling friends, family, anyone willing to help. Daniel tried. The responses varied. Some never answered. Some apologized. Some promised to call back. Most disappeared. Funny how quickly people vanish when your problems become expensive. Eventually, Daniel stopped asking. The embarrassment hurt more than the rejection. By the final week, he had sold almost everything valuable. The television, the gaming console, old collectibles, furniture, anything that could buy a little more time. It wasn't enough. Nothing close. The day he handed over the apartment keys felt strangely peaceful. No anger, no tears, no dramatic breakdown, just exhaustion, the kind that settles deep inside a person, the kind that comes from fighting too many battles in a row. His entire life now fit inside an aging pickup truck. A few boxes, a duffel bag, some clothes, and a future he couldn't see anymore. Interesting, because rock bottom rarely announces itself. One day, you simply realize you've arrived. Daniel parked near a gas station outside town and sat there for almost an hour. No destination, no plan, no idea what came next. Then he remembered the letter, the white envelope still sitting inside one of the boxes, the one he never opened. Something about it suddenly felt important. He climbed into the truck bed and searched through the boxes. After several minutes, he found it, still unopened, still forgotten. Daniel tore it open. The contents surprised him immediately. A legal document, an estate notice, and a handwritten message from a lawyer. His grandfather had died. Daniel blinked, then read the page again. Interesting, because he barely remembered having a grandfather. The old man had lived alone for decades. Daniel's father rarely spoke about him. Family gatherings never included him. As far as Daniel knew, they hadn't spoken in nearly 15 years. The paperwork explained everything. The old man left no children, no surviving spouse, no direct heirs willing to claim the property, which meant ownership passed to Daniel. The inheritance consisted of exactly one asset, a small parcel of land and an abandoned barn. Daniel actually laughed this time, a real laugh, because somehow life had managed to become even stranger. He was homeless, unemployed, nearly broke, and now the owner of a collapsing barn. What a miracle. Still, property was property. Maybe he could sell it. Maybe the land was worth something. Maybe someone would buy it. Any amount of money would help. The lawyer's office sat 3 hours away. Daniel arrived the following morning. The building looked old, small town old, the kind of place where everyone knew everyone. The receptionist smiled politely. The lawyer looked relieved when Daniel walked in. Interesting, very relieved. As as though he'd been waiting a long time for someone to claim the inheritance. The meeting lasted less than an hour. Most of the paperwork was straightforward. Sign here, initial here, date here. Then came the photographs. The lawyer slid several pictures across the desk. Daniel studied them. Interesting, because the barn looked even worse than he expected. Weathered wood, sagging roof, broken windows, years of neglect. The structure appeared one storm away from becoming a pile of lumber. The surrounding land wasn't much better. Overgrown fields, wild weeds, abandoned fences. The entire property looked forgotten. Then the lawyer said something unexpected. Your grandfather refused every offer. Daniel looked up. What offers? The property. Interesting, because that didn't make sense. Nobody would fight over a place like this. The lawyer seemed to read his thoughts. I asked him the same thing. Daniel frowned. What did he say? The lawyer smiled. Some things are worth more than they look. Silence. Interesting, because the statement felt oddly specific, almost intentional. The lawyer reached into a drawer, then removed a small metal key. Old, heavy, worn by time. This was left for you. Daniel accepted it carefully. No explanation. The lawyer shook his head. None. The key sat in Daniel's palm. Cold, mysterious, important, for reasons he couldn't explain. Interesting, because people don't leave keys behind without locks, and they don't protect worthless property for decades. Not usually. By late afternoon, Daniel found himself driving toward the inherited land. The roads grew smaller. The towns grew farther apart. Civilization slowly disappeared behind him. Hours later, he reached the property entrance. The truck rolled to a stop. Daniel stepped out. Silence greeted him. No traffic, no neighbors, no noise, just wind moving through tall grass. Interesting, because the place felt strangely isolated, almost hidden, as though the world had forgotten it existed. Then he saw the barn. The photographs hadn't exaggerated. If anything, they had been kind. The structure looked ancient. Sun-bleached wood covered the exterior. Parts of the roof had partially collapsed. Several support beams leaned at dangerous angles. The entire building carried the appearance of something surviving on stubbornness alone. Nearby stood a small farmhouse. Not much better. The windows were boarded. The porch sagged. Nature had slowly begun reclaiming everything. Daniel stared at it all. This was it. His inheritance. His fresh start. His last chance. Interesting, because most people would have seen disappointment, failure, another problem. Daniel mostly saw those things too, but something else sat beneath them. Possibility. Not much, just enough. The property belonged to him now, for better or worse, and at the moment, it was the only thing in the world that did. The sun was beginning to set when he finally approached the barn. Each step produced creaks beneath old boards and loose earth. The structure felt older up close, much older, as though decades of stories sat trapped inside the wood. Daniel reached the main door. Pulled. Nothing. Locked. Interesting, because abandoned buildings usually aren't locked. Not after years. not after decades. Then he remembered the key, the old metal key. Daniel removed it from his pocket. For a moment, he simply stared at it, then inserted it into the rusted lock. The mechanism resisted, then clicked. The sound echoed through the evening air. Loud, final, important. Daniel slowly opened the door. Darkness waited inside. Dust floated through narrow beams of sunlight. Old tools hung from walls. Broken equipment sat beneath tarps. The scent of age filled the air. Interesting, because despite its condition, the interior felt organized, deliberately organized, as though someone had cared deeply about this place. For a long time, Daniel stepped forward. The floor creaked beneath him. Then his eyes drifted across the far wall and stopped. Interesting, because someone had carved a message directly into one of the wooden support beams. Not recently, years ago, maybe decades. The letters remained surprisingly clear. Daniel moved closer, then read them, and instantly felt a chill move through his body. The message contained only 7 words. If you're reading this, you found it. Silence, heavy silence. Daniel stared at the words, confused, because he hadn't found anything. Not yet. Then another realization arrived. Maybe the message wasn't talking about the barn. Maybe the barn was only the beginning. And for the first time since arriving, Daniel began wondering what exactly his grandfather had spent a lifetime protecting. Daniel didn't leave the barn. Not immediately. Most people would have. Most people would have looked around for a few minutes, decided the place was worthless, and gone searching for a motel. But those 7 words refused to leave his mind. If you're reading this, you found it. Found what? Interesting, because the message made no sense. The barn itself wasn't hidden. The property wasn't hidden. The key wasn't hidden. So what exactly had his grandfather expected him to find? Daniel walked back toward the carved beam, studied the letters again. Old, very old. The cuts weren't fresh. Whoever carved them had done it years ago, maybe decades. His grandfather had clearly intended somebody to read them one day. But why? The setting sun pushed long shadows through the barn. Dust floated through golden beams of light. Everything remained silent. Then Daniel noticed something strange. The floor, interesting. Most of the barn floor looked untouched, covered in years of dust, spider webs, debris, except for one section. Near the rear wall, the dust there appeared thinner, not clean, not obvious, just different. Daniel slowly walked toward it. His footsteps echoed softly. The closer he got, the more unusual it looked. Interesting, because someone had walked there. Not recently, but not decades ago either. At some point in the last few years, someone had stood exactly where he was standing. Daniel crouched down. The wood beneath him appeared slightly worn. One plank looked newer than the others. Not new, just newer. Interesting. His grandfather had repaired this section. Why? Daniel pressed his hand against the board. Nothing happened. He knocked lightly. The sound echoed differently. Hollow, very hollow. Daniel froze. Interesting, because old barns weren't supposed to have hollow floors. At least not like this. He searched nearby until he found an old pry bar hanging from the wall. The metal was rusty but usable. A few moments later, he wedged it beneath the edge of the board, then pulled. The wood resisted, then suddenly lifted. A cloud of dust exploded upward. Daniel stepped back coughing. Interesting. His pulse had started speeding up, not because he expected treasure, because mystery has a strange effect on people. The unknown always pulls harder than certainty. Once the dust settled, Daniel looked down. A compartment hidden beneath the floor. Small, maybe 3 feet long. Interesting, because it wasn't empty. Inside sat a metal box, old military green. Locked. Daniel stared at it. For several seconds, he simply stared, trying to process what he was seeing, because hidden compartments belonged in movies, not real life, not inside collapsing barns inherited from forgotten grandfathers. Then another realization arrived. The key. Interesting. The old metal key. Daniel immediately reached into his pocket. His grandfather hadn't left him a property key. His grandfather had left him this key. For this box, his hands suddenly felt shaky. Not from fear, from anticipation. He inserted the key, turned it slowly. Click. The lock opened. Silence filled the barn. Interesting, because somehow opening the box felt bigger than losing his job, bigger than losing his apartment, bigger than everything that had happened recently. Daniel lifted the lid, then froze. Interesting, because there wasn't any money inside. No gold, no jewels, no stacks of cash. Instead, he found documents. Dozens of documents. Photographs, letters, maps, and one leather-bound journal. The journal sat on top, waiting, almost intentionally. Daniel picked it up. The cover looked worn from decades of use. Then he opened the first page. The handwriting immediately caught his attention. Strong, neat, deliberate. His grandfather's. At the top of the page sat a single sentence. If Daniel is reading this, I was right. Silence. Interesting. Daniel blinked. Read it again. If Daniel is reading this, I was right. Not whoever. Not my grandson. Not the heir. Daniel. Specifically Daniel. Interesting. Which meant his grandfather expected this moment. Expected him. Expected everything. Daniel turned the page. The next entry appeared dated 43 years earlier, long before Daniel was born. The journal began simply. Today they came back. Daniel frowned. Who? The next paragraph answered. The men from Hartford. Interesting. Daniel had never heard the name. The journal continued. They offered more money than before. I told them no again. Silence. Daniel turned another page. The entries stretched across decades. Every few years. Sometimes every few months. Always mentioning the same thing. Hartford. The men. The offers. Interesting. Because the numbers kept increasing. $20,000. $50,000. $100,000. $500,000. $1 million. Daniel stopped reading. His heart pounded. $1 million. For this place, impossible. Nothing here justified that kind of money. Nothing, unless, interesting, unless the buyers weren't interested in the barn, the property, or the land, unless they wanted something else. Daniel continued reading. The entries became increasingly tense. His grandfather sounded worried, cautious, almost afraid. One entry stood out. They think I don't know what lies beneath this land. Daniel froze. Interesting. Beneath this land. Not inside the barn. Not inside the house. Beneath the land. The journal continued. I made a promise in 1968. Some promises cost more than money. Interesting. Then came another page, and another, until Daniel reached an entry written only a few months before his grandfather died. The handwriting looked weaker, shakier, older, yet the message remained clear. If you're reading this, they never stopped searching. Daniel felt a chill. Interesting, because suddenly the story wasn't about inheritance anymore. It wasn't about bad luck or a forgotten barn. Somebody had spent decades searching for something connected to this property. Decades. Then he heard it. A sound outside. Silence immediately vanished. Daniel looked up. Interesting, because somebody was there. He was certain of it. The sound hadn't come from the wind. It came from footsteps. Outside the barn, Daniel carefully stood. His pulse quickened. The property was isolated, miles from town. Nobody should be here, especially after sunset. The footsteps stopped. Silence returned. Interesting, the kind of silence that makes people uncomfortable. Daniel slowly approached the doorway, then stepped outside. The fading sunlight painted everything orange. Fields, trees, the farmhouse. Nothing moved. No people, no vehicles, nothing. Interesting. For several seconds, Daniel stood there listening. Then he noticed tire tracks, fresh tire tracks, leading away from the property. His stomach tightened. Interesting, because those tracks hadn't been there earlier. He would have noticed, meaning somebody had recently arrived and recently left. The realization sent a cold sensation down his spine. Somebody knew the property existed. Somebody still cared about it. And judging by the journal, somebody had cared for decades. Daniel returned inside, this time with far more urgency. The journal suddenly felt less like family history and more like a warning. He searched through the remaining contents of the metal box. Photographs, old black and white photographs. Interesting. One showed his grandfather standing beside several men. Another showed excavation equipment. Another showed workers gathered near a massive hole in the ground. Daniel studied them carefully. Then his eyes widened. Interesting, because one of the photographs had writing on the back. Only 4 words. Never tell them where. Silence. Heavy silence. Daniel looked back at the journal, then at the photograph, then at the property surrounding him. Whatever happened here, it wasn't small. His grandfather had protected the secret his entire life, and somebody else had spent decades trying to uncover it. Then Daniel found the final item inside the box. A folded map. Old, yellowed, fragile. His hands carefully unfolded it. Interesting, because the map showed the property. Every acre, every fence, every structure. But one location had been marked with a red circle. A location nowhere near the barn, nowhere near the house. A place deep inside the overgrown northern section of the land. And beside the circle, his grandfather had written 6 words. "The truth begins beneath this tree." Daniel stared at the message. Outside, darkness continued swallowing the property. The smart decision would have been waiting until morning. Any reasonable person would have waited. But after losing everything, after finding the journal, after discovering someone had recently visited, waiting suddenly felt impossible. Daniel grabbed a flashlight, picked up the map, then turned toward the northern field, unaware that several 100 yards away, hidden among the trees, a pair of binoculars was watching him, and the man holding them immediately reached for his phone. "He's found the journal." A long silence followed. Then a voice answered, "Don't lose sight of him." The flashlight beam bounced across the field as Daniel walked. The northern section of the property looked different at night. Bigger, darker, older, interesting, because during daylight, the land seemed abandoned. At night, it felt like it was hiding something. The map remained folded in one hand, the flashlight in the other. Daniel followed the route carefully. His grandfather's red circle sat near the far edge of the property, almost half a mile from the barn. Interesting, because there was nothing valuable out here, at least nothing obvious. No buildings, no roads, no wells, just trees, tall grass, and silence. Yet someone had spent decades searching this land. Someone had offered millions for it, and someone had apparently been watching it. The thought made Daniel glance behind him. Nothing, only darkness. Still, the feeling remained. Interesting, because human instincts exist for a reason. Sometimes your mind notices danger before your eyes do. Daniel kept walking. The land gradually sloped upward. Then he saw it. The tree. Interesting. Even in the darkness, it stood out immediately. Massive, ancient. Its trunk was nearly twice as wide as the surrounding trees. The branches stretched in every direction, like giant arms protecting something beneath them. Daniel checked the map. The location matched perfectly. This was it. The truth begins beneath this tree. The words echoed inside his mind. Daniel stepped closer. The ground beneath the tree looked ordinary. Grass, roots, dirt, nothing unusual. Interesting. For several seconds, disappointment crept in. Maybe the journal wasn't literal. Maybe the message referred to something symbolic. Then his flashlight landed on a small patch of earth, and everything changed. Interesting. The dirt looked disturbed. Not recently, but differently, unlike the surrounding ground. Daniel crouched. The soil beneath the tree appeared harder, packed, almost as though somebody had intentionally covered something. His pulse quickened, because now he knew he wasn't imagining things. Something was here. The question was what? Daniel searched the area. After several minutes, he found an old shovel leaning against the tree. Interesting. A shovel, hidden behind thick brush. The wood looked weathered, old, yet somebody had deliberately left it there. For him, or for whoever eventually arrived. Daniel stared at it, then looked at the ground, then back at the shovel. His grandfather had planned this, every part of it. The realization felt strange. The old man had died months ago, yet somehow he still seemed to be guiding events. Interesting. Daniel drove the shovel into the earth. The first few inches came easily. Then the blade struck something solid. Clang. The metallic sound echoed through the night. Daniel froze. Interesting, because dirt doesn't make that sound. He cleared more soil. Then more. Then more. Slowly, a flat metal surface emerged. Large, rectangular, buried several feet underground. Daniel's heartbeat accelerated, not because of money, because mysteries are addictive. The closer you get to the answer, the harder it becomes to stop. 20 minutes later, the object finally revealed itself. A steel hatch. Interesting. A hatch beneath the tree, hidden underground. Daniel simply stared. His grandfather hadn't hidden a box. He hadn't hidden a chest. He had hidden an entire underground structure. The realization almost didn't seem real. Then Daniel noticed something else. A lock, an old steel lock attached to the hatch. Interesting, because he already knew where the key would be. The journal. Daniel hurried back to the tree, opened the journal. Several pages slipped loose. One fell onto the ground. Interesting, a folded piece of paper, one he hadn't noticed before. Daniel unfolded it. A key dropped into his palm. Silence. Interesting. The old man really had planned everything. Daniel returned to the hatch, inserted the key. The mechanism resisted, then clicked. The sound felt strangely final, as though a door sealed for decades had finally decided to open. Daniel gripped the handle, pulled. The hatch groaned. Rust cracked. Dirt fell away. Then slowly, it opened. A cold draft emerged from below. Interesting, because underground spaces shouldn't still have airflow after decades. Yet this one did. Daniel shined his flashlight downward. Stairs, concrete stairs, leading into darkness. Very deep darkness. For several seconds, he didn't move. Every survival instinct screamed at him to leave. Wait until morning. Bring help. Call somebody. Interesting, because curiosity was winning. And curiosity is responsible for some of history's greatest discoveries and some of its worst decisions. Daniel started descending. One step, then another, then another. The air grew cooler, the darkness thicker. Eventually, the stairs ended. His flashlight swept across the room. Then Daniel stopped breathing. Interesting, because the underground chamber wasn't small. It wasn't even close. The room stretched farther than his flashlight could reach. Concrete walls, steel shelves, heavy wooden crates, rows of them, hundreds. Silence filled the chamber. Daniel slowly moved forward. His footsteps echoed. The place felt frozen in time, like somebody had locked the door 50 years ago and never returned. Then his flashlight landed on a crate. Words had been painted across the side. Old faded letters. property of Hartford Mining Company. Daniel froze. Interesting. Hartford, the same name from the journal. The same people who spent decades making offers. The same people his grandfather never trusted. Suddenly, everything became much more real. Daniel approached the crate. Carefully, the wood looked ancient, yet surprisingly intact. After several attempts, he pried the lid open, then stared inside. Silence, heavy silence, because the crate wasn't full of treasure. It was full of documents, thousands of documents, maps, records, ledgers, photographs. Interesting. Daniel pulled out one folder. The papers inside appeared official. Government seals, signatures, approvals. Then he noticed something strange. Several pages carried red markings. Classified. Daniel frowned. Interesting, because classified government documents don't belong inside underground bunkers, especially not on abandoned farmland. Then he found a photograph. The image showed dozens of workers standing beside mining equipment. Nothing unusual until he looked closer. Interesting. The date, the same year mentioned in the journal. The same year his grandfather said he made a promise. Daniel turned the photograph over. His grandfather's handwriting covered the back. Only one sentence. This is where they buried the truth. A chill ran through him. Interesting, because suddenly the mystery felt much larger than hidden money, much larger than inheritance. This wasn't treasure. This was evidence. Evidence somebody wanted erased. Evidence somebody had spent 50 years trying to recover. Then Daniel heard a sound. Not inside the bunker. Outside. Interesting. An engine. Distant, but getting closer. Daniel immediately switched off the flashlight. Darkness swallowed everything. Silence followed. Then another sound. Vehicle doors opening. Several of them. Interesting, because nobody should know he was here. Nobody except the man with the binoculars. The realization hit instantly. Someone had followed him. Someone knew about the tree. And now someone knew the hatch had been opened. Daniel's heart pounded. Above him, voices echoed faintly through the night. Several men, moving toward the tree. One of them spoke. "We're too late." Another voice answered. "Not yet." Silence. Then the first man said something that made Daniel's blood run cold. "Find the grandson." Daniel didn't move. Not immediately. The darkness inside the bunker suddenly felt much heavier. Interesting, because a few minutes earlier, the underground chamber had felt like a discovery. Now it felt like a trap. Above him, footsteps moved across the ground. Several people, organized, professional, not curious locals, not random trespassers, people who knew exactly where they were going. Interesting, because that meant one thing. The tree wasn't a secret anymore, at least not to them. Daniel crouched behind a stack of crates. The darkness helped, but darkness only works if the people searching don't know where to look. And judging by the voices above, these people knew. Then he heard the hatch, metal scraping against metal. Silence followed. Interesting. They found it. One of the men spoke. "Open." The voice sounded calm. Cold. A second later, the hatch groaned. Then faint light appeared at the top of the stairway. Interesting. Daniel's pulse accelerated. The bunker suddenly seemed much smaller. The men hadn't found him yet, but they were seconds away from entering. Then another voice stopped them. Wait. Silence. Interesting. The men obeyed immediately. Whoever spoke carried authority. Real authority. The kind people don't question. A few seconds later, footsteps approached the hatch. One set, not several. Then the new voice spoke. Older, controlled. Check for recent activity. Silence followed. A moment later, someone answered. The lock was opened. Another pause. The grandson found it. Interesting, because nobody asked who the grandson was, meaning they already knew. They knew Daniel existed. They knew he inherited the property, and they apparently expected him to find the bunker eventually. A cold sensation settled inside his chest. This wasn't random. These people had been watching for a long time. Then the older voice spoke again. Search the property first. Interesting. Daniel nearly sighed with relief. Nearly, because the men weren't leaving. They were buying time. The footsteps moved away from the hatch. Vehicle doors opened. Engines started. Then silence returned. Daniel remained motionless. Interesting, because surviving dangerous situations often comes down to patience. Moving too early gets people caught. Several minutes passed, then 10, then 15. Finally, Daniel switched on the flashlight again. The beam cut through the darkness. Interesting, because now the bunker looked different. Before, he had been exploring. Now he was investigating. The difference mattered. Someone wanted whatever was hidden here badly enough to monitor the property for decades, which meant the answer sat somewhere inside this room. Daniel moved deeper into the bunker. Rows of shelves stretched into darkness. Crates, boxes, metal cabinets. His grandfather hadn't hidden a secret. He had hidden an archive. Interesting. The farther Daniel walked, the stranger the contents became. Old mining records, property maps, survey reports, hundreds of files, thousands of pages. Then he found a locked cabinet. Unlike everything else. Interesting, because most of the bunker looked functional. This cabinet looked protected, intentionally protected. The steel appeared thicker, the lock newer. Daniel tried the key from the journal. Nothing. Wrong key. Interesting, which meant another key existed. The question was where. Daniel examined the cabinet more closely, then noticed something taped underneath. A small envelope. Hidden. Interesting. His grandfather really had planned for everything. Daniel opened the envelope. Inside sat a single key and a note. Only 5 words. Some truths destroy empires. Silence. Daniel stared at the sentence. Interesting, because that wasn't something ordinary people write. Not unless they know exactly what they're protecting. He inserted the key, turned it. The lock opened. The cabinet door swung outward, and Daniel froze. Interesting, because inside sat dozens of videotapes. Old videotapes, labeled by year, decades worth of recordings. Then he noticed something else. A projector. Old, dusty, still connected. Interesting. His grandfather wanted these viewed, not stored. Viewed. Daniel selected the earliest tape, the one marked 1968. A few moments later, the projector flickered to life. The image appeared against the concrete wall. Grainy, black and white. A group of men stood beside excavation equipment. Interesting. The same workers from the photograph. The same location. The same year. Then the recording continued. The camera moved, showing a massive excavation site. Huge, far larger than Daniel expected. Interesting, because nobody digs holes that size without a reason. Then the footage suddenly changed. Workers began shouting, running, pointing. Something had happened. Something underground. The camera zoomed closer. Daniel leaned forward, then stopped breathing. Interesting, because the excavation wasn't uncovering gold or oil or minerals. It was uncovering another structure, a hidden structure buried deep beneath the earth. Massive stone walls emerged from the ground. Ancient walls, far older than anything around them. The workers appeared stunned. The camera shook. Voices filled the recording. Then one sentence became clear. Nobody tells Hartford. Silence. Interesting, because Daniel had finally reached the beginning. The thing his grandfather spent decades protecting. Then the tape ended. Abruptly, the screen went dark. Daniel immediately grabbed another tape. Then another. Hours seemed to pass. The story slowly assembled itself. Interesting, because Hartford Mining Company never reported the discovery. Instead, they tried to hide it. The ancient structure sat directly beneath land they didn't legally own, and whatever existed below appeared valuable, extremely valuable. Several workers disappeared. Records vanished. Officials were bribed. Witnesses changed their stories. The deeper Daniel looked, the worse everything became. Then he reached the final tape, recorded by his grandfather, not the company, him. The footage showed an older version of the man Daniel barely remembered. His grandfather stared directly into the camera. Tired, determined, interesting, because this was no longer evidence. This was a message. The old man spoke. If you're watching this, then I failed. Daniel froze. Interesting. The words immediately hit harder than expected. His grandfather continued. I hoped they would stop looking. A pause. They never did. Silence filled the bunker. The old man sighed, then continued. Hartford wasn't interested in the structure. Daniel frowned. Interesting, because that changed everything. If they didn't want the structure, what did they want? The answer arrived seconds later. They wanted what was inside. Interesting. Then his grandfather revealed something Daniel never expected. The structure contained a chamber. Inside that chamber sat dozens of artifacts. Historical artifacts, ancient artifacts, evidence capable of rewriting parts of recorded history. Hartford planned to sell them privately for billions, not millions, billions. The room suddenly felt colder. Interesting, because now The obsession made sense. The offers, the surveillance, the decades of searching, everything pointed toward the same goal. Then his grandfather spoke again. The chamber still exists. Daniel's heart skipped. Interesting, because that meant the real secret wasn't in the bunker. The real secret remained hidden somewhere else. Then his grandfather delivered the final piece. The entrance isn't on this property. Silence. Interesting. Daniel blinked. Read the man's expression, trying to understand. Then came the twist. The entrance is beneath Hartford's headquarters. Everything stopped. Interesting, because suddenly the entire story flipped. The company spent 50 years searching here, while the actual entrance sat beneath their own building. The irony felt almost unbelievable. Then Daniel understood. His grandfather hadn't hidden the treasure. He hid the location. And without the location, the chamber remained inaccessible. Then a loud noise echoed through the bunker. A crash. Metal. Close. Very close. Daniel immediately switched off the projector. Silence. Then came footsteps. Inside the bunker. Interesting, because the search had ended, and somebody had finally found the hatch. A flashlight beam swept across the darkness. Then another. Then another. Voices followed. One of the men laughed. We found him. Daniel's blood ran cold, because the voice didn't come from the stairs. It came from behind him. Daniel didn't move, not because he wasn't scared, because fear had frozen him in place. Interesting, because hearing someone behind you is unsettling. Hearing someone behind you inside a hidden underground bunker is something else entirely. The flashlight beams swept through the darkness. One landed on Daniel. Another followed. Then a third. Interesting. 3 men, all armed, all wearing dark jackets, without logos, without names, without anything identifying who they worked for. Professional. The man in front smiled. Not a friendly smile, the kind people wear when they already believe they've won. Daniel Reeves. Interesting, because he didn't ask. He already knew. Daniel slowly stood. The projector remained silent behind him. The videotapes scattered across the floor. The older man glanced at them, then sighed. That's unfortunate. Interesting, because he sounded disappointed, not angry, as though Daniel had spoiled something. The man stepped forward. You watched them. Daniel didn't answer. The smile widened. I'll take that as a yes. Silence filled the bunker. Interesting, because nobody rushed. Nobody panicked. The men behaved like people who had all the time in the world, which made them more dangerous. Then the older man noticed the final videotape, the one containing Daniel's grandfather's message. His expression changed, only slightly, but Daniel noticed. Interesting. The tape mattered a lot. The older man nodded toward it. Your grandfather was stubborn. Silence. He cost a lot of people a lot of money. Interesting. Daniel finally spoke. Who are you? The man laughed softly. People have asked me that question for 40 years. Then he looked around the bunker. The answer changes depending on who's asking. Interesting. Not the answer Daniel wanted, But answers weren't the reason these men came. They came for something else. Then the older man surprised him. "We're not here to kill you." Silence. Interesting. Because Daniel immediately knew it was only half true. The man continued, "We're here because you found something that belongs to us." Daniel glanced toward the cabinet. The videotapes, the documents, the photographs. The older man followed his gaze, then shook his head. "No. Interesting. Not the documents, not the evidence." "Then what?" The answer arrived immediately. "The map." Daniel froze. Interesting. Because he hadn't mentioned the map. Yet somehow they knew. The red circled map, the one leading to the tree, the one still folded inside his jacket. The older man smiled. "There it is." Interesting. He had been watching Daniel's reaction, looking for confirmation, and he found it. The realization irritated Daniel. The man continued, "Give me the map." Silence. "No." Interesting. The word escaped before Daniel even thought about it. For a moment, nobody moved. Then one of the armed men laughed. The older man didn't. Instead, he studied Daniel carefully. Interesting, as though evaluating him, comparing him to someone else. Then he nodded. "Just like him." Daniel frowned. "Who?" The man's smile returned. "Your grandfather." Silence. Interesting, because that wasn't the answer Daniel expected. The older man walked slowly through the bunker, running his fingers across the crates, the shelves, the documents. Then he stopped beside one of the photographs, the excavation photo. Interesting. His eyes lingered on it, almost nostalgically. Then Daniel noticed something. Something important. Very important. The man looked younger in the photograph. Much younger, but recognizable. Interesting. The realization struck instantly. The man had been there, at the excavation, at the beginning, before Daniel was born, before the cover-up, before everything. "You were there." Silence. The man's expression changed. Then he nodded. "Yes." Interesting. No denial, no hesitation, just truth. Daniel's pulse accelerated, because suddenly he wasn't standing in front of a messenger. He was standing in front of history. The older man sighed. "We were supposed to become rich." Interesting, because bitterness hid beneath the words. Deep bitterness, the kind that survives decades. "We found something nobody should have found." Silence. "Something worth billions." Interesting. The same word from the videotape. Billions. The older man looked toward the ceiling, then laughed softly. "And one stubborn farmer ruined everything." Daniel immediately thought of his grandfather. Interesting, because for the first time, the old man felt real. Not a mystery, not a name, a person, someone who had stood against people like this, someone who had protected the truth for 50 years. The older man continued, "Do you know how much effort it takes to maintain a secret that long?" Silence. "Do you know how much money?" Daniel didn't answer. The man wasn't looking for answers. He was looking for sympathy. Interesting. The wrong audience. Then the older man extended his hand. "The map." Silence. Again. "No." Interesting. This time, the smile disappeared. The atmosphere changed immediately. One of the armed men stepped forward. The older man raised a hand, stopping him. Interesting, because violence wasn't the first option. Not yet. Then the older man said something unexpected. Your grandfather left you something else. Daniel froze. Interesting. Something else. The man nodded. As insurance. Silence. Then he reached inside his jacket. Daniel tensed. But the man didn't pull a weapon. He pulled a photograph. Old. Worn. Interesting. The moment Daniel saw it, his stomach dropped, because the photograph showed his father, much younger, standing beside Daniel's grandfather, and someone else. Interesting. Someone Daniel recognized. The older man, the same man standing in front of him now. Silence filled the bunker. Daniel stared, trying to understand. Then the older man spoke. We were partners. Everything stopped. Interesting, because that made no sense. His grandfather spent 50 years hiding from these people. How could they have been partners? The older man seemed to anticipate the question. We started together. Silence. We ended differently. Interesting. Then he pointed toward the photograph. Your father knew. The words landed like a hammer. Daniel blinked. What? The older man nodded. He knew everything. Silence. No. Interesting. Because Daniel immediately rejected the idea. His father never mentioned any of this. Never. The older man sighed. He didn't tell you because he promised your grandfather. Silence. Then came the twist. The biggest one yet. Your father wasn't supposed to die. Everything stopped. Interesting. Because the statement felt wrong. Dangerously wrong. Daniel's father died in a traffic accident. Everyone knew that. The older man shook his head. No. Silence. It wasn't an accident. Daniel felt the world shift beneath him. Interesting, because some truths don't add information. They chain everything you already believed. The older man continued. Your father found the entrance. Silence. And before he could tell anyone, the sentence remained unfinished. It didn't need finishing. Daniel already understood. Interesting, because suddenly, this wasn't about his grandfather anymore, or Hartford, or hidden chambers. This was personal. His father died because of this secret. Then a loud sound echoed from above. Gunfire. Everyone froze. Interesting, because nobody expected it. Not Daniel, not the armed men. Then another shot echoed, followed by shouting. The older man's expression changed instantly. For the first time all night, he looked worried. Interesting, because whoever was arriving, even he wasn't expecting them. One of the armed men reached for his radio. Static. Nothing. Another shot echoed, closer this time. Then footsteps thundered across the hatch above. Fast. Aggressive. The older man turned toward the stairs. What the hell is happening? Nobody answered. Then a terrified voice screamed from above. They found us. Silence. The older man's face went pale, because apparently someone even more dangerous had just arrived. The bunker went silent, not ordinary silence, the dangerous kind. the kind that appears right before everything changes. Interesting, because 5 seconds earlier, the older man controlled the situation. Now he looked just as confused as everyone else. Another gunshot echoed from above. Closer, followed by shouting. Then a scream. A real scream. Short, sudden, then silence. Interesting. One of the armed men looked toward the stairway. What do we do? The question wasn't directed at Daniel. It was directed at the older man, the man who suddenly seemed less certain than before. Interesting, because confident leaders don't ask questions. They give answers. And right now, he didn't seem to have any. Then another voice exploded from above. Move, move. Gunfire erupted again, this time sustained. Not warning shots, not random shooting. A firefight. The older man's face hardened. Get upstairs. Immediately, the 2 armed men rushed toward the stairway, weapons ready. Interesting, because they forgot something. Daniel, for the first time since entering the bunker, nobody was watching him. Not directly. Then the older man moved toward the stairs as well. But before leaving, he turned, looked directly at Daniel. Interesting, as though debating something. Then he pointed. Don't move. Daniel almost laughed, because the situation had already moved far beyond instructions. The older man disappeared up the stairs. The sounds of combat immediately grew louder. Then another explosion echoed above. Dust rained from the ceiling. Interesting, whatever was happening outside wasn't small, not even close. Daniel stood alone. For several seconds, he considered running, leaving, escaping. Most people would have. But one thing stopped him. His father's photograph, still lying on the floor. Interesting, because now he knew his father died because of this secret. Not because of bad luck, not because of an accident. Because of this, Daniel picked up the photograph, looked at it again. His father, his grandfather, the older man, standing together, smiling, before everything went wrong. Interesting. Then something caught his attention. The background, not the people. The background. Daniel leaned closer. Interesting, because the photograph wasn't taken near the excavation site. It was taken somewhere else, somewhere familiar, very familiar. Then realization struck. The farmhouse, the old farmhouse, sitting above ground. The one Daniel inherited. The structure behind them matched perfectly. Interesting, which meant something important. The photograph wasn't documenting the discovery. It was documenting a meeting, a secret meeting, at the property. Then Daniel noticed something else, something tiny, yet impossible to ignore. His grandfather was pointing toward a location outside the frame. Interesting. The direction mattered. Why? Daniel wasn't sure, but instincts told him it did. Then another explosion shook the bunker, this one much stronger. The lights flickered. Interesting. Wait, lights. Daniel froze. The bunker shouldn't have lights, not after decades. Yet something briefly illuminated along the far wall, only for a second. Then darkness returned. Daniel turned slowly. The wall looked ordinary, concrete, steel shelving, dust, nothing unusual. Yet he knew what he saw. Interesting, a flicker, a reflection, something hidden. Daniel crossed the room. Carefully, the sounds of fighting continued above. Gunfire, shouting, chaos. But now another mystery demanded attention. He reached the far wall, examined the concrete. Nothing. Then his flashlight swept lower. Interesting. A seam, tiny, almost invisible, running vertically through the concrete. Daniel touched it. Cold, solid, yet undeniably there. A hidden door. Interesting, because apparently the bunker wasn't the final secret. The bunker was protecting another one. Daniel searched nearby, looking for a mechanism, a switch, a latch, anything. Then he remembered the photograph, his grandfather pointing. Interesting, the direction. Daniel turned, followed the exact angle. The line led directly toward a shelf, an ordinary shelf, covered in dusty boxes. Interesting, because hidden things usually hide behind ordinary things. Daniel moved the boxes aside, then froze. A lever, old, steel, almost invisible beneath years of dust. Interesting, his grandfather really had planned everything. Daniel pulled it. For a moment, nothing happened. Then a deep mechanical sound echoed through the bunker. Metal grinding, locks releasing. The hidden wall slowly moved. Silence filled the room. Interesting, because behind the wall wasn't another storage room. It was a tunnel, a massive tunnel, stretching into darkness, far beyond the property. Daniel stared, trying to process what he was seeing, because ordinary farmers don't build secret tunnels. Not tunnels this size, not tunnels reinforced with concrete. Interesting, which meant somebody else built it a long time ago. Then Daniel saw something mounted beside the entrance. A plaque, old brass, covered in dust. He wiped it clean. The words beneath nearly stopped his heart. Unit 7, Access Corridor. Silence. Interesting. Unit 7. The name meant nothing. Yet somehow it felt important. Dangerously important. Then Daniel noticed another document pinned beneath the plaque, yellowed with age. A map, not of the property, a much larger map. Interesting, because it showed the entire region. Roads, towns, cities. Then Daniel found the tunnel route. His eyes widened. Interesting, because the tunnel didn't end beneath the property. It stretched miles away, directly beneath Hartford's headquarters. Silence. The old man's words suddenly made sense. The entrance isn't on this property. The entrance is beneath Hartford's headquarters. Interesting. His grandfather hadn't hidden the route. He had hidden access to the route. Then Daniel spotted a folder resting beside the map. One folder, marked differently from everything else. The cover carried only 3 words. Project Unit 7. Daniel opened it and immediately wished he hadn't. Interesting, because the first page wasn't about mining or artifacts or Hartford. It was military, highly military, classified. The second page made things worse. The third page worse still. Then Daniel understood. The excavation site wasn't the real discovery. Not entirely. The ancient chamber was only part of the story. Buried beneath it, someone had found something else. A facility, a hidden facility, not ancient, modern, and according to the documents, it didn't belong to Hartford. It belonged to the government, a government program erased from official records. Interesting. Then Daniel reached the final page, and everything changed, because listed among the project personnel, he found a familiar name, a name he never expected to see. His father. Silence, heavy silence, because suddenly his father's death looked even less accidental than before. Then another gunshot echoed from above, followed by rapid footsteps descending the stairs. Fast, desperate, interesting. Someone was coming, and judging by the pace, they weren't winning. Daniel grabbed the folder, the map, the photograph, then stepped toward the tunnel, because one thing had become painfully clear. The men hunting him weren't searching for treasure. They weren't searching for artifacts. They weren't even searching for the bunker. They were searching for Unit 7. And if the documents were right, his father died protecting it. His grandfather died hiding it. And now someone was willing to kill for it. Then a voice echoed from the stairway, a voice Daniel immediately recognized. The older man, terrified. Seal the tunnel. Silence. Then another voice answered from somewhere deeper, inside the darkness. A voice Daniel had never heard before. Cold, calm, and impossible to mistake. You're 50 years too late. Daniel froze. The voice hadn't come from the stairway. It hadn't come from behind him. It came from inside the tunnel, deep inside the darkness. Interesting, because whoever spoke sounded calm, far too calm for someone standing in the middle of a firefight. Above, gunfire continued. Shouts echoed through the bunker. The older man screamed another order. Find him. Daniel didn't wait. For the first time all night, he made a decision instantly. He entered the tunnel. The hidden doorway slowly closed behind him. Metal groaned. Locks clicked. Then silence swallowed everything. Interesting. The transition felt unreal. Seconds ago, chaos surrounded him. Now only darkness remained. The tunnel stretched ahead. Concrete walls, steel support beams, emergency lights running along the ceiling. Dim, old, yet somehow still functioning. Interesting, because facilities abandoned for decades shouldn't still have power. Daniel walked carefully. The folder remained tucked beneath his arm. His grandfather's photograph remained in his pocket. And questions filled his mind. Questions without answers. Questions that seemed to multiply every hour. Then he saw the man. Interesting, not immediately. At first, he appeared only as a silhouette, standing beneath a distant light. Motionless, watching. Daniel stopped. The stranger didn't. Several seconds passed. Neither spoke. Interesting, because sometimes silence reveals more than conversation. The stranger looked old, not weak, old. The difference mattered. His posture remained straight, his movements controlled, the kind of posture built through discipline, years of discipline. Then the man stepped forward. The light revealed his face. Daniel's breath caught. Interesting, because he recognized him immediately. Not personally, from the photographs, from the videotapes, from the excavation records. The fourth man, the one who appeared beside his grandfather. His father, the older man from Hartford. Only unlike the others, he wasn't dead, at least not yet. The old man's eyes settled on Daniel. Then the folder, then the photograph, sticking slightly from Daniel's pocket. Interesting. Recognition flashed instantly. You found it. Daniel almost laughed. Everybody kept saying that. The journal, the beam. Now this man. Found what? The question finally escaped. What exactly did I find? Silence followed. The old man smiled. A tired smile. The kind people wear after carrying secrets too long. Then he answered. The truth. Interesting. Daniel sighed. Not because the answer was wrong, because it wasn't enough. The old man seemed to understand. He motioned deeper into the tunnel. Walk with me. Daniel hesitated. Interesting. Trust felt dangerous now. Very dangerous. Yet every answer so far had come from moving forward, not backward. So he followed. The tunnel stretched farther than expected. Much farther. Interesting. Because according to the maps, Hartford's headquarters sat miles away. Yet the construction remained flawless. Concrete, steel, ventilation. Someone spent a fortune building this place. Then Daniel noticed doors, dozens of them, lining both sides of the corridor. Metal doors, each carrying numbers. Unit 7A, Unit 7B, Unit 7C. Interesting. The names sounded military. The old man noticed his curiosity, then finally began explaining. Unit 7 wasn't a mining project. Silence. It wasn't even about artifacts. Interesting, because Daniel already suspected that. The documents hinted at something larger, much larger. The old man continued. 57 years ago, a government program discovered something buried beneath Hartford's excavation site. Silence. They never expected anyone to find it. Daniel looked toward him. What was it? The old man stopped walking. Interesting. For the first time, uncertainty appeared in his eyes. Not fear, respect. Then he answered. Knowledge. Silence. Daniel frowned. The answer sounded ridiculous. The old man smiled slightly. I know. Then continued. The artifacts weren't valuable because of what they were. A pause. They were valuable because of what they contained. Interesting. Now Daniel listened carefully. The old man resumed walking. Maps. Silence. Records. Another pause. Locations. Daniel's pulse quickened. Interesting. Because now things were finally connecting. The excavation, the secrecy, the murders. The old man continued. The chamber revealed the existence of several forgotten sites scattered across the continent. Silence. Places nobody knew existed. Interesting. And suddenly, billions of dollars made sense. Because history creates power, and power creates money. The old man nodded, almost reading his thoughts. Hartford wanted ownership. A pause. The government wanted control. Another pause. Everyone else wanted a piece. Interesting. Then Daniel asked the question that mattered most. My father. The old man's expression changed immediately. Interesting, because grief still lived there. After all these years, the old man looked away, then nodded. Your father was the best man among us. Silence. The words carried weight. Real weight, not politeness. Truth. Then they reached another door, larger than the others. Interesting. The old man opened it. Daniel stepped inside, then stopped. Interesting, because the room looked like a command center. Old monitors, communication equipment, maps, files, hundreds of files. Every wall carried information. Every shelf carried records. Someone had lived here for decades. The realization felt impossible. Then Daniel noticed something framed on the far wall. A photograph. Interesting. His father, younger, smiling, standing beside the old man. Silence filled the room. The old man approached it, then spoke softly. He saved my life. Interesting. Not once, not twice, several times. The old man smiled sadly, and I failed to save his. Daniel looked at him, waiting, because now came the truth. The real truth. The old man took a deep breath, then finally delivered it. Your father discovered the betrayal. Silence. Interesting, because that word changed everything. Betrayal, not accident, not bad luck. Betrayal. The old man continued. The government program. A pause. Hartford. Another pause. They were already working together. Silence. They had been working together for years. Daniel felt his stomach tighten. Interesting, because suddenly every side looked guilty. Every side. The old man nodded. Your father learned they intended to sell access to the sites. A pause. To private buyers. Interesting. History, power, money, all connected. Then the old man looked directly at Daniel. He tried to stop them. Silence, and that's why they killed him. The room felt smaller, colder, heavier, because now there was no uncertainty left. His father was murdered, not accidentally, not indirectly, murdered. Then something else occurred to Daniel. Interesting, a dangerous thought. If they killed him. Silence. Why didn't they kill my grandfather? The old man smiled. A strange smile. Interesting, because apparently Daniel had finally asked the correct question. The old man walked toward a cabinet, opened it, removed a file. One file, thicker than all the others. Then he handed it over. Daniel opened it. His eyes widened instantly. Interesting, because every page contained surveillance reports, photographs, notes, observations, decades of them, all focused on one man, his grandfather. Silence. Then Daniel understood. They hadn't spared him. They watched him for 50 years, waiting, searching, hoping. Interesting. Then the old man spoke. They believed your grandfather knew where the final site was. Silence. And they were right. Daniel froze, because suddenly the entire mystery changed again. The chamber, the artifacts, Unit 7, none of those were the final secret. There was still one more. Then alarms suddenly erupted. Red lights flashed. Warning sirens echoed through the corridor. Interesting. The old man looked toward the ceiling. For the first time all night, he appeared worried, genuinely worried. Then a computerized voice echoed through the facility. Perimeter breach detected. Silence. Multiple hostile contacts inside Unit 7. The old man closed his eyes. Interesting, because somebody had finally found the tunnel. And judging by the expression on his face, the people arriving were far more dangerous than Hartford. The alarm continued screaming through Unit 7. Red lights flashed across the walls. The command center suddenly felt smaller, more dangerous. Interesting, because everyone had spent 50 years searching for the truth. Now the truth was about to find them. Daniel looked toward the old man. The man wasn't panicking, but he wasn't calm either. Interesting. For the first time since they met, genuine concern appeared on his face. The computerized voice echoed again. Multiple hostile contacts detected. Sector 4 compromised. Sector 5 compromised. Silence followed. Then the old man spoke. They found us. Interesting. Not Hartford. Not the men from the bunker. Someone else. Daniel immediately understood. The real enemy. The people behind everything. The people his father died trying to expose. The old man nodded, almost reading his thoughts. Yes. Silence. The people above Hartford. Interesting. Because suddenly Hartford looked small. The company had never been the mastermind. They had been employees, partners, tools. The old man walked toward a wall map, then pointed. Several locations appeared marked in red, scattered across the country. Interesting. The forgotten sites, the locations discovered decades earlier, the locations everyone wanted. The old man sighed. They never cared about history. Silence. They cared about ownership. Interesting. Ownership meant power. Power meant money. Money meant influence. The same story, repeated throughout history. Then another explosion shook the facility. Closer, dust drifted from the ceiling. Interesting. Whoever was coming wasn't slowing down. The old man reached beneath a desk, removed a small metal case, no larger than a briefcase. Daniel stared. Interesting, because the old man handled it carefully, almost respectfully. Then he placed it on the table, opened it, and Daniel finally understood everything. Silence filled the room. Inside the case sat dozens of documents. Original documents, maps, coordinates, photographs, the complete archive, the master archive. Interesting. Everything everyone had been searching for. Everything. The old man looked at Daniel, then pushed the case toward him. Daniel frowned. What are you doing? The old man smiled sadly, finishing a promise. Silence. Interesting, because those words sounded familiar. Very familiar. Then Daniel remembered. His grandfather. The journal. Some promises cost more than money. The old man nodded. He made me promise. Silence. If anything happened, A pause. The archive goes to you. Daniel stared. Interesting, because none of this made sense. Why him? Why not a government agency? Why not a museum? Why not anyone else? The old man seemed to anticipate the question. Then he answered, because your grandfather trusted only one thing. Silence. Family. The words landed harder than expected. Interesting, because Daniel spent years believing he had been forgotten, ignored, abandoned. Yet every step of this journey suggested otherwise. His grandfather had been preparing for him, specifically him, for decades. The realization felt strangely emotional. Then another explosion interrupted the moment. Much closer. Interesting. The enemy had reached the corridor. The old man immediately closed the case, then handed it to Daniel. Go. Silence. Daniel didn't move. The old man pointed toward another passage, a narrow tunnel extending deeper underground. Interesting. An escape route. Of course, people protecting secrets for 50 years always build escape routes. Then Daniel heard footsteps. Fast, many footsteps. Coming closer, the old man drew a pistol. Calmly, without hesitation. Interesting, because suddenly Daniel understood. The man never expected to leave. Not really. This was his ending. The old man looked toward him, then smiled. Your father would have done the same. Silence. Interesting, because that single sentence removed every remaining doubt. Daniel nodded, then picked up the case and ran. The tunnel narrowed quickly. Concrete became stone. Stone became earth. Interesting. The deeper he moved, the older everything looked. Almost ancient. Then gunfire erupted behind him. Heavy gunfire. The old man had made his choice. Daniel never looked back. Not because he didn't care, because some sacrifices deserve respect. And respect means not wasting them. Minutes later, the tunnel opened into a massive underground chamber. Daniel stopped, speechless. Interesting, because the chamber was real. The final site, the site everyone wanted, the site his grandfather protected, the site his father died protecting, the site the old man spent decades hiding. It existed. Massive stone pillars rose from the darkness. Ancient carvings covered the walls. Artifacts lined hidden chambers. History surrounded him. Not the history of a single nation. The history of civilizations. Lost civilizations. Forgotten civilizations. Interesting. For several moments, Daniel simply stared, because money suddenly felt meaningless. Completely meaningless. This wasn't treasure. This was legacy. Then he noticed something sitting alone near the center of the chamber. A wooden box. Small, simple, interesting. The simplest object in the entire room, which made it important. Daniel approached carefully, then opened it. Silence. Interesting, because inside wasn't gold, not jewels, not money, just a letter addressed to him, his grandfather's handwriting. Daniel slowly unfolded it, then began reading. Daniel, if you're reading this, then everything happened exactly the way I feared it would. Silence. First, I'm sorry. Interesting. Daniel swallowed hard. The old man's words felt different now. Real. Human. The letter continued. I know life wasn't easy for you. I know there were times you felt alone. And I know there were times you believed nobody was looking out for you. Silence. Daniel felt his chest tighten. Interesting, because those words were true. Painfully true. The letter continued. You were wrong. Silence. I watched from a distance. Not because I didn't care. Because the people searching for this place would have followed anyone I loved. Interesting. Daniel closed his eyes. The years suddenly looked different. Not abandonment. Protection. A terrible form of protection. But protection nonetheless. The letter continued. The barn wasn't your inheritance. The land wasn't your inheritance. This isn't your inheritance. Silence. Then came the final sentence. The sentence that changed everything. Your inheritance is the chance to choose what kind of man you become. The chamber fell silent. Interesting, because after billions of dollars, after hidden tunnels, after murders, after decades of secrets, the old man wasn't talking about wealth. He was talking about character, legacy, choice. Daniel folded the letter carefully, then looked around the chamber one final time. Interesting, because suddenly he understood. The secret wasn't meant to make him rich. It was meant to test him, just like it tested his grandfather, just like it tested his father. And now it was his turn. Months later, the story shocked the country. The archive became public. Historians verified the discoveries. Investigations exposed decades of corruption. Arrests followed. Executives disappeared from headlines. Powerful people lost powerful positions. Interesting, not because Daniel sold the secret, because he refused to. Instead, he gave it away. To the world, exactly the way his father would have wanted, exactly the way his grandfather hoped. 1 year later, Daniel returned to the property. The barn still stood. The farmhouse looked better. The fields looked healthier. Life had returned. Interesting, because in the end, the greatest thing he inherited wasn't hidden underground. It wasn't buried beneath a tree, and it wasn't worth billions. It was the realization that even when life throws you out, even when everything falls apart, even when you think you've lost everything, sometimes the thing waiting for you isn't wealth, it's purpose. Daniel looked toward the old barn, then smiled for the first time in a very long time. And somewhere beyond the fields, beyond the secrets, beyond the years of silence, a promise made 50 years earlier had finally been kept.